Who can we expect to make their Springbok debut this year in 2026? For context, Rassie named 16 uncapped players in the first alignment camp in 2025, and only 4 players went on to make their debut. That was Neethling Fasheer, Asenati Nklabakanye, Kobus Visser, and Ethan Hooker. This year, from the last alignment camp, Rassie has included 11 players that are uncapped. In this video, I want to go through all 11 players and give you my most likely and least likely to make their Springbok debuts this year. As always, make sure you leave your thoughts down in the comments, leave this video a like, and if you haven't, please hit that subscribe button because we're on the road to 100,000 subscribers. Now, let's get into it. These are your 11 uncapped players from the 70-man alignment camp squad that Rassie Erasmus put forward. We've got Kai Pratt, Cheswell Uester, Hashim Peed, Riley Norton, Paul de Villiers, Sebastian de Klerk, Sipusitu Mbelele, Mani Chichuka, Marcus Muller, Bato Klekane, and Yaku Williams. Lots of massive names on that list, lots of stars, but the reality of the situation is that not all of them are going to get their Springbok debuts this year. We saw Zachary Porthen never made alignment camp last year and ended up debuting for the Springboks last year. So there's also guys that are probably outside this alignment camp that could definitely work their way into the team. I'm initially thinking of a guy like Siyaya. Does Rassie Erasmus experiment with him this year? He hasn't been added to an alignment camp yet, but could be one of those guys who are a shock call-up that end up playing 1 or 2 games for the Springboks just because Rassie Erasmus and the coaching staff sees potential in him and are willing to give him some game time. So those are all the uncapped players in the 70-man alignment squad. And I want to look at the most unlikely players to make their debut this year, and I'll give you my reasoning. Now, the 4 players that I've selected for the unlikely category are Sebastian de Klerk, Kai Pratt, Manu Chichuka, and Yaku Williams. Now, Kai Pratt, let's start with Sebastian de Klerk. Now, the reason why he's not going to make his Springbok debut this year is because he's picked up an injury and will be out for the entire season. He's one of those guys who you were kind of looking at in the URC campaign, pegging him to get a couple of Springbok test matches this year because he was in such good form, and unfortunately injury has taken him out of the picture and he will no longer be able to play a part in the Springbok season. The next unlikely one is Kai Pratt. Now, he's a loosehead prop who is pretty young at the moment. The problem I'm seeing is that we have a lot of depth in the loosehead prop category. We have Oxenchair, we have Mchunu, Steenekamp, Fenter, and Kai Pratt. You've also got Thomas Toy that can shift between tight head and loosehead prop. So there's probably 5 guys ahead of Kai Pratt at the moment, which it's not that many, but it is a lot, especially the quality that we have in that number 1 jersey. So while Kai Pratt is incredibly young, he will be part of the Springbok setup in years to come. I just think it's unlikely to see him in a Springbok jersey this year. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on whether you think he could play himself into a position where he's playing ahead of Ox, playing ahead of Mchunu, playing ahead of Steenekamp or Boan Fenter. Or does Rassie Erasmus experiment this year and chuck quite a few caps out there because we have that 2027 Rugby World Cup coming along and he wants to take the best 33-man squad to Australia. Next up is Manu Chichuka. Now, Manu's been playing some really good rugby for the Sharks. He can play all around the back row of the scrum. 8 is probably my favorite position for him, but he is also a flanker. The only issue with being a loose forward in this country is that there is so much depth in that position, and it's incredibly difficult to play guys like a Peter Steph Toy out of position. It's incredibly difficult to play incredible rugby to dethrone Jasper Visser, Cameron Hanekom, Ulrich Lowe, Ben Jason Dixon, Jean-Luc Dupree, Sio Khaleesi, Ulrich Lowe, Kwagga Smith, Evan Ruiz, Vincent Chichuka, his brother Marco van Staan, Ruan Venter, Kobus Visser, and Paul de Villiers. That's how many loose forwards we have. Now, Manu has been playing some incredible rugby, but I think the argument has to be made is that he's probably only 3rd or 4th choice in all 3 of those positions, 6, 7, and 8. Whether Rassie wants to continue to build out those loose forwards and have multiple options going into next year, we'll have to wait and see. But it's just unlikely for me at this scenario, this situation, to see Monica Chuka making his debut. I think he might play against the Barbarians, might even play in that SAA side against Zimbabwe on the 20th of June. I'm not too sure. And then the final one on my list is Yaku Williams. Now, Yaku Williams burst onto the scene for the Sharks. He can play wing. He's played fullback for the Sharks as well. But again, I think if you're putting up him and Cheswell Uester, who are similar ages, who have burst onto the scene at the same time, I think a lot of people will pick Cheswell Uester ahead of Yaku Williams at the moment. I think Cheswell Uester's had a slightly better season than Yaku Williams, and I think he's probably higher on the rungs than Yaku Williams is at the moment. Again, if we just take a look at our wing prospects, Kurt Lawrence, Cheslin Colby, Makazole Mapimpi, Sebastian de Klerk is out injured, Kanan Moody, Edwil van der Merwe, Cheswell Uester, and Yaku Williams. So while it is possible that Yaku Williams gets a debut on the wing for the Springboks, it'll probably happen in the Barbarians game, and if not, he'll probably play for the SAA side against Zimbabwe. So very interesting, but we do have a lot of wings. Now, I want to move on to my likely list, because I do think all of these, if not many of these, will make a Springbok debut this year. Now, the first one is Hashim Peed. And I'll tell you why he's going to make his Springbok debut this year. Well, first of all, he was the Junior Springbok Player of the Year in 2025. Hashim Peed is also a scrum off, and we currently have 3 scrum offs that are injured: Kobus Reinach, Grant Williams, Jaden Hendrickse, which means the only 3 left from the alignment camp squad are Morne van den Berg, Hashim Peed, and Faf de Klerk. Now, I do think Ambrose Papier is going to get called up, and he's also going to be part of that mix as well for that 9 jersey. But when you're looking at Kobus Reinach and Grant Williams, who are only going to be back in July, you would imagine that Hashim Peed is going to play against the Barbarians. Yes, it doesn't count as a Springbok cap, but Kobus Reinach and Grant Williams might not be available for that England test match, the Scotland test match, the Wales test match. So Rassie Rasmus is going to have to go into the depths of the scrum offs and pull either Faf de Klerk back into a Springbok jersey or give Hashim Peed an opportunity. And I think the latter is probably more likely, because Hashim Peed's in form, because he won Player of the Year for the Junior Springboks last year, and he's got a full career ahead of him that Rassie Rasmus can start building now. So I think Hashim Peed, in all likelihood, will make a Springbok team at some point this year. The next player is Cheswell Uester, and I touched on him earlier. Cheswell Uester just looks like a different caliber compared to his classmates. I think Cheswell Uester is going to be one for the future. Kind of like how Kanan Moody burst onto the scene a couple of years ago. I think Cheswell Uester has that amount of potential, and I think we will see him in a Springbok jersey this year. He's just so fast. He's so nimble. He knows where the try line is. His defense is good. He's great under a high ball. Now, he did pick up an injury this week in the URC, so it's going to be interesting to see when he's back, but I do think he gets a shout this year. Next up is Riley Norton, and I'm almost certain Riley Norton is going to get a Springbok debut this year, because our locks are in trouble. We've got 5 locks that are injured at the moment: Eben Etzebeth, Archie Snyman, Loet Diache, Jean Klein, and Salman Murat. Now, the only 2 that are likely to be available for June, July is Salman Murat and Eben Etzebeth. So Eben and Ruan Noke will probably start that game against England in the 4-5 jersey. But then you got to start looking at the bench. We need a lock, if not 2 locks on the bench. Riley Norton could definitely be one of those guys. JJ van der Mesht as well is probably going to get a Springbok debut this year. Let's see. Moving on, we've got Paul de Villiers, who has been in spectacular form this season. And I think he's been playing better rugby than Monica Chuka, and I think he provides just a little bit more in that loose forward department. So I do think Paul de Villiers will get a start in a Springbok jersey this year. Again, it's just who are you not playing if you're playing Paul de Villiers? That is the only sort of question mark around whether Paul de Villiers will make a Springbok team this year. Next up, we got Sipasitu Mbelele. Now, he has just picked up an injury, but I think Rassie's plan was always to give Mbelele a cap in the end of year tour last year. He got called up, if you recall. And then I think he picked up an injury and didn't end up playing. He's now also picked up an injury again. I'm not sure when he's going to be back, but I do think he is going to be one of those guys that we test out quite a few times this year, because our hooker department, yes, we have quite a lot of depth. Malcolm Marx, Johan Grobler, Marcus van der Merwe, Jannik Wessels, and Andre Hugo Venter. But the drop-off from first in Malcolm Marx to the next player is quite a bit. So I still think Rassie Rasmus is trying to find that permanent second choice hooker. And maybe Mbelele is the answer. Next up, we've got Marcus Muller, who will almost certainly make his Springbok debut this year. It's going to be interesting to see whether he goes and plays with the under-20 Springboks in July, or if Rassie Erasmus keeps him in the squad. Similarly, Ethan Hooker has picked up that shoulder dislocation, so I do think there is an opportunity for Marcus Muller to slide in there in the outside centre. Behind Jesse Creel, probably Kane and Moody. I'm not sure if Lucanio is going to be included in the squad, but I do think Marcus Muller gets some game time in a Springbok jersey this year. And then finally, Batso Klekane. Again, a loose forward, but he provides something a little bit different than Paul de Villiers, than Mane Chuchuka. He's an absolute battering ram. He's an enforcer, and he's one of those guys that are going to inflict pain and violence onto the opposition. And I think he's definitely one for the future. Again, being part of that loose forward conversation, it's difficult for him to get in, but I think he will this year. You guys let me know what you think. That's my story today. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.